All right, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We may have some more folks trickle on as we go, but we want to be respectful of your time. Before we kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to Diana, who is our interpreter this evening.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. My name is Diana. I am here with the Community Language Cooperative, and we're here to help create a space for language justice. And what that means is that we want to create a space where everybody feels most comfortable sharing and expressing ideas in the language of their heart or in the language that they're most comfortable in. In order to do this, we're going to be turning on simultaneous interpretation. The interpretation will not be turned on until after I finish saying this in Spanish. It's really important that if you are not fully bilingual, that you select your preferred language. If you don't select a language, you're either going to hear a different language than yours, or you may not be able to hear the presenter. And whenever that interpretation turns on, you're going to see a little globe either on the bottom of your screen or on the top right hand of your screen, depending on whether you're joining us through a computer, through an iPad, or a phone. If you have any questions or any concerns, if you can't hear correctly or if you can't find the interpretation, you can always use the chat box. I constantly check it, and I know that most presenters do as well. So you can also talk to us that way. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Diana, yo estoy aquí con la Cooperativa Comunitaria del Lenguaje y estamos aquí para ayudar a crear un espacio para la justicia del lenguaje. Y lo que eso significa es que vamos a crear un espacio donde todos puedan compartir y participar en el lenguaje de su corazón o en el lenguaje en el que se sientan más cómodos. Vamos a usar interpretación simultánea. Cuando yo termine de decir esto en español, vamos a aprender la interpretación. Van a ver un icono de un globo abajo de su pantalla o en la esquina derecha, dependiendo si están en una computadora o en un teléfono o un iPad o una tableta. Es muy importante que si ustedes no son bilingües, prendan y seleccionen su lenguaje preferido, si no, no van a poder escuchar al presentador o lo van a escuchar en otro lenguaje aparte del suyo. Si tienen alguna pregunta, si no pueden prender la interpretación, si no nos pueden escuchar, por favor, usen la cajita de chat. Yo lo estaré chequeando al igual que la presentadora. Muchas gracias.
All right, thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And then we're going to go over a quick program of the evening. So with me are some fabulous co-presenters. We have Sana Kendall, who's our City Recovery Manager, and also Travis Storin, our Chief Financial Officer. So they're going to get us started by going over some information about our recovery planning process and also be sharing some information about the American Rescue Plan Act. Then we're going to have some time to have an open Q&A and answer all the questions you may be holding. And then we're going to dive into what I think is the most fun part, which is doing some discussion and some virtual whiteboarding to get some of your ideas as well. So as we go through this presentation, feel free to make use of the Q&A function to add questions as you have them, and then we'll go ahead and answer those when we get to the Q&A portion. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis to get us started.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. And to be clear, I think Sana's the one who brings the fabulous, and I'm just allowed to tag along. But good evening, everybody. It is always so nice to see folks turn out in the evening hours and willing to offer their time and thoughts and passions around how our local government here in Fort Collins can best serve our residents. And so thank you in advance for carving out time from your evening. We're going to start by sort of presenting some of the core tenets of what we're fashioning as the city's recovery plan as it pertains to the pandemic. And then we will turn this over to Sana to share with the group some of the opportunities that have come our way by way of the federal government and the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed this past March. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. And as delightful as it may be to relive 2020, just to do a little bit of a recap of how the COVID-19 pandemic has manifested itself within the Northern Colorado region. But really going back to March of last year is that first known case that we had within our community. And we'll all remember throughout the spring being under stay-at-home order, facial covering orders from both the city as well as the county health department. And it was really into the summer. I'm sort of on the right-hand side of this slide now, at which we were informed by our partners at the county and at the state levels of government that Fort Collins was going to receive an allotment of what at the time was the CARES Act. This was sort of the precursor to the American Rescue Plan, ARPA. And the city received an allocation by way of the county of roughly $9 million to respond to immediate pandemic needs that were presenting themselves throughout the community in so many different ways. We did have a pretty strict timer on those funds. It was at the time, the rule from the US Treasury was that they essentially expired on December 31st of 2020. And so it was a use it or lose it type of proposition. And so we're really proud of the way that those funds were deployed across individual residents, businesses, and then the city's own operations and how we supported the public health response is kind of our three-pronged strategy there. But what was really missing because of that timeline that I mentioned earlier, and it being so short, was engagement. Fortunately, and Sana will cover much of this when we talk about ARPA, but the city's allotment of $28 million from this year's package actually has a multi-year timer, and it doesn't expire until effectively the end of 2026. So with that in mind, we do have a lot more runway, so to speak, in gathering the community input in how we deploy these funds into their highest and best purpose. And we're trying to really balance the line of what are the immediate response needs that still exist in the community, like eviction prevention or help with utility bills, and what are the longer term objectives that we can use those funds for in order to advance economic, environmental, health, and equity outcomes within that multi-year time period. So we're really pleased that we're able to have this opportunity with you tonight. We'll toggle over to the next slide, please, Sarah. So in reflecting on the pandemic and kind of the events of the last 18 or 19 months, we want to start by recognizing that not everybody was starting from the same place pre-pandemic, and that what the pandemic really did was it uncovered that soft underbelly of the many ways in which those disparities within the community show themselves. And the reason I mention that is because at a community level, economically speaking, as Sarah mentioned, I'm the finance officer for the city. The local economy has rebounded in some really marvelous and unanticipated ways. And yet, not everybody's recovering in the same way, even if we have that sort of comprehensive recovery at the highest sort of summary altitudes. And so there are a lot of sectors within our community that are still very much struggling. As you might expect, travel and tourism, the lodging sector, as well as sort of, I'll say, kind of adventure type activities like a river tour on a tube or a kayak, those sectors are still hurting very badly. Our creative individuals and organizations, whether that be fine arts, media, or performing arts, are also very much struggling still, musicians and local venues. Food services, I know that many of us have experienced this, but both the individuals who staff our community restaurants, as well as the restaurant owners, are each struggling in their unique ways. Women, it is no surprise that with the dual demands of oftentimes in many households, primary responsibility for childcare and other caregivers like elderly parents, and trying to simultaneously juggle that with a professional career has been particularly challenging on women. It's commonly been referred to, instead of a recession, a she-session. And then people of color, of course, very much sort of starting in that different place pre-pandemic relative to the rest of the community, and the many ways in which we've got underserved members of our community. And the pandemic in many ways has magnified that. So the recovery plan, we really want to take this opportunity to pause and develop that multi-year plan. I mentioned the $28 million amount earlier. The city's annual budget is right around $500 million. And $28 million is a very substantial federal infusion. And it's really a golden opportunity that we can even pause and have this conversation around what is the highest and best use and how can we best support residents and businesses and nonprofit organizations around the community. So we'll speak a little bit about our vision for that plan in the hopes that you'll be generous with your feedback tonight. So first, kind of some core aspects of our vision. I'll start with the blue box at the top. We would like to see as many residents and businesses participating in a resilient, vibrant, and inclusive future. And the way that we've kind of defined what does that mean to have a resilient, vibrant, inclusive future, you sort of see below. We've talked about healing and the many dimensions, whether that is actual individual physical health or social health or economic health. So the process of becoming sound, either for the first time or again, inclusivity. So we would like to include as many people in the past that have not had the opportunity to provide their input, and in some cases have not had the opportunity to benefit from some of the local government programming that the city offers. Resilience, we experienced a very dramatic and very sharp, hopefully short-term, it appears to be short-term, economic recession in the early days of the pandemic. And creating a more resilient economy, community, and really state of being for individuals is top of mind as we put together this plan. And then vibrancy and ensuring that we've got a place where all feel like they belong and all bring their unique talents and energies to our community. So with that in mind, guiding principles, what do we really want to accomplish with this plan in terms of the outcomes? Again, helping our community rebound, thrive. When we say a triple bottom line lens on the sustainability line here, what we mean by triple bottom line, traditionally in the business world, you think of the bottom line in strictly financial terms. Here in our community, for your local government, a triple bottom line is defined as economic outcomes, environmental outcomes, and social outcomes, and really keeping each of those top of mind. Ensuring that we've got engagement. And tonight is a prime example of that. We're really looking forward to the open discussion and brainstorming that hopefully you all are willing to provide. And then finally, in this recovery plan, you know, the federal funding will certainly be fuel for such a plan, but the idea is that it can be a standalone plan as well, that these would be our recovery goals with or without that federal infusion. And it's really those monies that will enable us to deploy this plan. In short, that bottom line, we're thinking of this both simultaneously. What is the immediate response to the pandemic, and what are the areas within our community that need assistance now or in the short term? And then how do we set things up for that longer term recovery that will take place over the course of several years? So the way we've divided up the work here, Sana, our recovery manager, who will be on in just a moment, is leading a team of talented professionals within the city, leaders across several of the city departments, across the 6 teams that you see here. The left side is really the strategic teams that I would categorize as service delivery, the community-facing functions of the recovery plan across economic recovery and a team of professionals there, equity and community recovery, and then finally, both health and environmental resilience. On the right-hand side, as opposed to service delivery, I'd say more on the service support and how do we put those first 3 teams in a position to be successful? And how do we make sure that your elected officials in the form of the city council are getting the information that they need? So we have an engagement team led by Sarah Moline, who you met just now, a performance measurement and reporting team. So it's one thing to state what outcomes we would like to see, but how are we going to measure those and say, yes, we did or we did not achieve that goal? And then finally, process improvement. Given that we've got multiple years to work with here, we undoubtedly will be learning lots along the way about how to greater optimize the funding on a year-by-year basis as we move forward. So in terms of the timeline, we are very much right in that phase 1, phase 2 area of the slide you see here. We're in our engagement work right now as we speak. Concurrently, we're beginning to draft and develop the plan itself. As we move forward, hopefully after doing a check with our council and our community, as well as our internal stakeholders within the city organization, we can then move to plan adoption. This is something we would ask the city council for to ultimately adopt and say, yes, we think that the staff has put together a plan that best serves the community members in our assessment as the elected officials, of which we as city staff are not the elected officials. So a couple key dates there. We'll be doing a check-in with the City Council on October 26th, largely reporting out on the type of feedback we get from you tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sana Kendall. Sana is our recovery manager here for the city, and she was a prominent leader within the initial response phases of the pandemic last year when it was the CARES money and working with our emergency services office and our county partners. So Sana is going to talk a little bit about the sort of array of funding options. I'll turn it over to you, Sana.
Thanks, Travis. Too kind with your words, but I appreciate it. Yeah, when we talk about the recovering funding, one of the biggest components that I'll want to really caption with this is we've been really talking with our community and our elected officials and others about the recovery plan should really be led by our community and the needs of our community, and that the American Rescue Plan funding is going to be one tool to help us in achieving recovery. And so that's something that I would really kind of push for others as well. But we will be talking about funding and how we might allocate those. So next slide, Sarah, thank you. So when we talk about the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA as we're calling it, we're really talking about this red bubble here, the $360 billion that was allocated specific to local governments and states in terms of opportunities to help in terms of the recovery. However, we acknowledge there is additional American Rescue Plan dollars all over our community in terms of childcare, rent assistance, utility water bills, library, small business support, and other items within that. We really do talk about really being able to track what is coming into the city of Fort Collins, the organization, but also an example of what is coming into our community. We talk a lot about under small business, restaurant relief fund, 91 restaurants and businesses were able to receive about $23 million in the last 60 days from the Restaurant Relief Fund under the American Rescue Plan. And so that's money infused into our communities as a whole. The other piece I would really share is we're working hard with our partners at the county and at the state to really make sure that we're leveraging the dollars and being able to really maximize and collaborate and avoid duplication of funds. So we'll talk about that, especially in our engagement process and what that looks like. So next slide, Sarah. So the city of Fort Collins, as Travis mentioned, has received $28.1 million. We actually have already received our first half payment and have been reporting on those dollars, as well as working with the county and understanding what they're receiving and the needs and opportunities for collaboration. The one big piece when we talk about the American Rescue Plan and the $28.1 million is it must be related to the response and recovery from the COVID pandemic. And that's a really key piece when we're really looking at what are those opportunities and does it tie back to pandemic. Next slide. So what is eligible? Now, as Travis mentioned, we had received about $9 million of our CARES allocation in early 2020. That was very specific to address the negative economic impact, as well as certain activities within the public health response. With the American Rescue Plan dollars, because we're receiving this directly from the federal government, this guidance is opening the doors. An example that we always talk about is under the public health response, the American Rescue Plan is allowing us to look at behavioral healthcare services because we know the pandemic has really exacerbated mental health, substance abuse, and domestic abuse. And so those are opportunities. We are continuing to observe the US Treasury guidance. They had released the interim final rules in April and May, and we'll have what we're calling the final rules after waiting for community feedback, specifically around what is equity-focused services and what does that look like and how do we make sure that our whole community is being able to be addressed in this space. Additionally, there's opportunities specific in clean water broadband and sewer as opportunities. And another differential is around revenue loss with the CARES funding. That was an aspect that was not eligible, however, is eligible within the $28.1 million that the city is receiving. And again, the ineligible is an important piece. We cannot utilize those funds for our own debt services, fund reserves, or as a federal match requirement. So those are things that we want to make sure we stay away from. Next slide. So as mentioned, we are working hard in terms of collaborating with our partners specific around the recovery plan public engagement. Know that we have worked with the county, and so the county just released their survey last week, and those are the same exact questions that we in Fort Collins are asking. And that's to ensure that we are all hearing the same information, and we've made a commitment to share that information across organizations and communities to make sure that these impacts are heard not only from us and our elected officials, but from the county and others. So these are the themes that have been coming up. We've had for 1,000 responses thus far, as well as in addition, we've done quite a few of the face-to-face engagement processes and have heard these. Childcare has come up multiple times. The social isolation, I think, is one when you think about the impacts for mental and physical health as opportunities. And these are, again, questions that we would love to really have opportunities to discuss with this group specifically and elsewhere. So we're also happy to go out and talk to folks. Next slide. So happy to answer any questions before we go into the interactive portion, and we hand off to Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sana. So I am going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. Go take a look at the Q&A. This is a great opportunity if you do have questions for Sana and Travis, who are our experts. To go ahead and put that either in the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, or in the chat as well. We'll give a minute or two for questions to come in. One thing that I always know we get asked about that I'm going to start us off with is if Sana, you or Travis could address how we're spending anything on COVID right now. Are we doing any spending on our response for COVID right now?
Sana, would you like to take that?
Yes, happy to. So a couple of things. Our council was gracious in terms of really understanding that the pandemic is not over and has allocated 15% of our $28 million specific to being able to address those needs as they come about. Examples are around specifically those experiencing homelessness and being able to help in support of shelter and services there. The Eviction Legal Defense Fund is another opportunity that we've been utilizing. And then, of course, much needed personal protective equipment is areas that we've been really focused and emphasizing. We still had a little bit remaining of the CARES dollars, so we are also expending that. Examples for our small business is our economic health office put together a program, because what we found when we were releasing grant opportunities specific for our small businesses, not all were ready to apply for those, specifically around accounting, maybe having their financial books ready to apply. And so that was done in really June, July to help folks be prepared to apply for these opportunities. Are just a few examples that we've been utilizing in that short term. Travis, did you want to add any others that you think I might have missed?
No, I don't, but I appreciate it. I think that was really thorough. Thanks, Sana.
Let's see, I'm not seeing any other questions come through. I want to give everyone the opportunity to put that in. And maybe too, if we go through our activity and there are additional questions that come up, feel free to ask those as well. Oh, okay. I did see one just come through. How can community members share their priorities for the plan?
Sarah, obviously, I was going to say, if you want to take that one first, because I know you've spent a lot of time in this space, I will hand it to you first, and then I can definitely add on if you'd like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here one more time. So we have a variety of different tools that we have been using to do outreach to our community members and engage with them. And our virtual hub for recovery is in our interactive Our City page. So you can find it at ourcity.fcgov.com/4FOCO. There's a variety of different tools depending on how much time you have. So we have a virtual survey. We also have a virtual whiteboard where you can share ideas and react to other folks' ideas. But beyond that, we've been out in the community really partnering with folks at events, chatting with our friends, our community partners, and other community organizations to see what they think. And really, the best way is to take that survey or give us a call. We're happy to sit down and chat. So really kind of whatever you have time for, we want to hear your ideas. I should also note that no idea is too big or too small. We really like specifics. So rather than just saying, support small businesses, if you have a specific example of how small businesses can be supported, share that with us. Sana, I know you have a couple examples you like to share, and I want to invite Travis to as well.
Yeah, I would say we've also been doing postcards because we also know that there are folks who are unable to potentially do those online. And so we've been receiving about 6 a day in terms of ones where we sent those out directly to some community members, and they've been able to fill those out and send those to us. I think those have been really wonderful to take a look at. We also have council members who are hosting listening sessions and have said they would love to hear from their community about how the allocation might be best spent, as well as the prioritizations that the community is interested in, and being able to share that across. And then of course, being able to email our leaders, I think, is another piece of that. I believe the email is, and I'm going to get this wrong, fcleaders@fcgov.com, I believe.
City leaders at FCGov.
Oh, city leaders, thank you.
I'll put it in the chat. While I've got the mic open, I just want to emphasize, in the spirit of the question, we're taking the feedback from sessions like tonight and the whiteboard that we'll work on together, that Sarah will bring up when we're through Q&A. We're taking the feedback we've gotten through the website, on social media, the emails that come through the council, and really summarizing that, analyzing it, and relaying it directly to your elected officials. So to answer the question, that's really how we're going to get your input to the decision makers. And we view the city council as the ultimate decision makers of how we use these funds.
Perfect. Thank you for bringing it all together for us there, Travis. We have another question that came in. This one is two-pronged, so I'm going to go ahead and read the first part of it, and then I'll go to the second part. And I think, Sana, you're probably best poised to answer this one. So the question is, ARPA, so the American Rescue Plan Act, is multifaceted. Can you provide a brief overview of the statewide influx of funds and how those are being administered by other areas of Colorado?
Yeah, so there is quite the influx of funds, obviously, at the state level. We are on a bi-monthly call with the state of Colorado that will share those resources as well. We also are collaborating as closely as possible. An example would be around rental assistance and sharing the information that is coming out through the state of how those funds are being distributed, when those will be released for mortgage assistance, and really working with the county and our nonprofit groups specifically in making sure that folks are aware of those funding sources. I think those are a big piece. The state of Colorado has done an amazing job in terms of being able to track all the different types of fundings that are coming through the American Rescue Plan. It is quite the matrix. And so one of the biggest pieces, as we've always shared, is happy to look at what is those emphasis in the areas and really point you in that direction. And I believe those are opportunities that we can also potentially link into our website so that you can see what, how it flows back to the state. For that, we also are part, like I said, of the Larimer County Collaborative that is also tracking those and really trying to, again, say, where's the best opportunities and how are they being administered, and how do we, if we're not leading those, support and raise that up so that our community is aware of those resources as they're coming out. So I would say a lot of them are coming out, and it's a matter of how to navigate that and really make sure that our community is aware of each of those.
Perfect, thank you, Sana. And you hinted at parts of the second question in your response, but the second part of this question is, can you provide any information regarding how this may have economic development implications, such initiatives that perhaps support collaborations across all Northern Colorado communities?
Well, gosh, I was telling Travis this morning, we were in a conversation with the state and the county specifically, right, about where there are opportunities specifically around housing and mental health, because those tend to become the most highly elevated in terms of the engagement that we've been receiving, as well as the state of Colorado. So initiating those conversations. And then in terms of the economic development groups, I would say working on a regional plan, and it is called Reignite Northern Colorado specifically. It's a strategic plan for the region. On this, it's still in draft form, looking at how is there opportunities around workforce, childcare, right? And really that talent retention, because we are seeing those are becoming one of the largest conversations when we're talking about the economic implications in this area. And then Travis, I didn't know if you wanted to add more in this space too.
I was going to mention the regional Reignite plan also. We've also got a number of our community nonprofits who are looking to convene working groups around this as well, and just discuss, before we really put pen to paper on each of the individual things that we can do, what's a big idea? In the past, some of the projects that have required multiple governmental agencies, just to use a couple of examples, things like the widening project that's happening on I-25, required the partnership of all of our local municipalities and counties. The police regional training facility, the airport, they're all sort of joint efforts that we can point to there. And so really that Reignite plan, I think, is the meeting of the minds that Sana is referring to.
Perfect, thank you both. And this will be last call for now for questions. But again, if they come through at the end, we can answer those as well. Right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and transition to, I think, Sana, Travis's and my favorite part of the evening, which is to hear from you all and get some ideas. So I'm going to share my screen one more time just to kind of show the questions that we'll be working through with you all, and then we're going to hop into a virtual whiteboard and have some time to answer these questions. So as Sana mentioned earlier, we're really trying to take the view of, what are our immediate needs and our long-term needs, and get that deep understanding of what folks need the most right now, what they're still struggling with. So with that in mind, we have our first question, which is, what impacts of the pandemic are you still seeing or experiencing? Now, this could be you personally or your business, or even something that you're not experiencing, but your friends and family are. And then specifically thinking, what would help with that? And this is one I don't want to put any boundaries on it. It could be something big or small, but what do you need for that impact to be lessened. And then finally, our last question is taking that really long-term view, looking at the resilience of our community and that building back stronger piece. How can we make our community stronger? What would make Fort Collins stronger? And that's, pie in the sky ideas, but we really want to think about, if another pandemic comes, how can we make sure we're better suited to weather the storm? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing this, and Travis and Sana are going to promote all of our attendees up to panelists so you can interact here. And I'm going to get our whiteboard set up. Alrighty, so as Travis and Sana do that, you should be able to suddenly see the whiteboard, and you will have access to the annotation notes. So once you're promoted to a panelist, you can go ahead and at the top of your screen, you'll be able to choose view options and then click annotate, and that should allow you to annotate here. And it will take a minute or two for everyone to get promoted.
And I'm sorry to say, I'm getting a strange error message that I don't recognize on a couple of these. And I'm wondering, Sana, if you've had any more success than I have.
I have a couple of them that have said they're rejoining, and I think they have to accept the being promoted to a panelist.
Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing in case that's part of the problem here. The joys of technology, you'd think we'd know how to do it by now.
Oh, they're coming on right now, it looks like.
Perfect. Yeah, and no pressure to turn your cameras on. I should throw that out as well. All right, looks like we almost have everyone on here. All right. Okay, looks like we're all on, and I'm going to go ahead and reshare that whiteboard here. Okay, so you should all have access to the whiteboard, and then at the top of your screen, there's going to be a menu, and you click on view options, and then click on the annotate, and that will give you a menu and allow you to click on different tools to draw. So if you get there, go ahead and click on the text. I see Sana popped in, she's there. All right, we'll give everyone a minute to navigate that. And then we're gonna spend the next few minutes really answering this question. So if you have ideas, go ahead and use that text annotation tool and type in your answer of what impacts of the pandemic are you still seeing or experiencing. We'll spend the next 5 minutes or so doing that, and then we'll have a short discussion. I'm gonna go ahead and put myself on mute, and please message us if you're stuck and something's not working for you. And for those of you who may be on a phone or something's not working, feel free to put your answers to this question in the chat as well, and we will capture those as a part of our feedback. All right, we'll give it one more minute here and then we'll do some discussion. All right, it looks like we have lots of rich ideas here, and I am saving these so even if they overlap, we'll be able to look at the individual responses later. So I'm seeing lots of different topics, and I'm wondering if anyone wants to hop off mute and share a little bit more about what they put down and give a little bit more context. I'm seeing specifically a little bit about like food insecurity, food services, access to health insurance, working with some of those who are especially impacted, including the victims of domestic violence. Would anyone like to share?
I will share if fine. I'll be less wordy than my attempt at a pithy commentary. Actually, what I was going to end with, as far as an idea, is to explicitly talk about how we create awareness around vulnerable populations in Fort Collins. I just think that there's a piece of this where we serve, and there's a piece of this where we plant seeds for the future, so that we can do our best to reduce the numbers of vulnerable populations. And so I don't want ARPA to lose. I want ARPA to address these amazing vulnerabilities, but I also feel that ARPA has to have a future looking thrust about it that creates explicit plans for assisting the community in knowing and understanding what its population is, so that if there's a call to action, that work is done. The awareness is there. We can do something good for our community members. We can do something good to lift up the entire community by helping those less fortunate, those who are subject to issues that are out of their control. Lots of this harkens to what others have mentioned in the way of things that really suppress growth for our individual community members. So this all works together. It just seems like there's a strategy for sustainability beyond ARPA that has to be inside of the strategy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Pam. And Sana, I don't know if I could put you on the spot and have you share a little bit about how we're incorporating that perspective. I just think about how you talk about ARPA as one tool. And I wonder if you want to add and respond a little bit to what Pam had shared.
Gosh, right. I don't think we have any one kind of magic bullet to help in this space. And I think I'm just sitting with the conversation that Pam was talking about. It's not only what do we do now, but how do we really not prevent it, but make sure that those are really opportunities to address and set up the system so that we really don't create more of this and or exasperate some of the challenges. And I think that's one of the pieces we're very mindful of. I know when Travis was going over, so we really did talk about what does that look like now and into the future. And I think that's the part about the resilience and what that looks like. Because I do think that's the biggest piece that we're trying to really understand beyond the pandemic And even in budget conversations, there've been a lot of how do we sustain beyond the American Rescue Plan? And I think that's where the regional conversation and really that big idea and addressing it there is a big conversation specifically around mental health, the domestic violence, drug abuse, substance abuses that we've been seeing, as well as gun violence, right? We're seeing more of that for sure. So it's how do we implement that and really make sure that it's not lost in some of these amazing opportunities that we're seeing with the funding.
Thank you. And it looks like maybe this was from Elizabeth, your story about Crossroads and some of the challenges they've experienced. And I think maybe your answer got cut off a little bit there. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you put in there in the whiteboard.
You know, hi, and I took myself off of mute and put the camera on because I know it can be kind of lonely with only a couple of faces up there, but I did throw a couple of things up there. That one wasn't mine, but I wanted to share, that's fine. I would love to have the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been learning in terms of some of the hardest hit members of our community, low-income Latinx immigrants in Fort Collins who largely have been employed in hospitality and restaurants and construction and cleaning services, and some of those industries that we know have been really hard hit, and just saw some conversation about, you know, haven't really fully recovered. So in light of that, I wanted to share that we have collected some data with our local immigrant population. And so we have some stats. By the way, I'm an assistant professor at CSU in social work. And so we have some data hot off the press that just happens to coincide with COVID. And we did ask some questions about COVID and have really have learned that there's just so much hurt still, you know, now 18 months into the pandemic. So just to maybe highlight a couple of those, we have learned that 9 in 10 of the 160-ish folks that responded to the survey lost hours at work due to COVID. And there's about 1 in 4 that were unemployed. And of those, 7 in 10 lost their job due to COVID and had been in their job for 4 years prior to that. And 57% of those who had any kind of impact of COVID reported being behind on rent payments and 28% behind on mortgage payments. And then 6 in 10, according to the USDA's official measure of food insecurity, have low or very low food security. And then we also have already talked about the mental health needs. And so I just wanted to share that 1 in 5 has moderate to extremely severe anxiety, and about the same for depression. And the access to qualified mental health professionals who are culturally competent, you know, bilingual, bicultural is pretty low as well. And just as a sort of indication of community rootedness, the average length of time in the city was 15 years. So in light of that, been speaking with some leaders of nonprofits and want to share that there's this collective ask that's emerging to really think about using these funds to prioritize those who have worked with some of the more hard hit populations throughout the pandemic, BIPOC communities, immigrant community, and thinking about supporting the general operating costs of those organizations for sustainability. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, just recognizing the tremendous pour out of these nonprofits over the last 18 months and the reality that they're trying to do so much with not enough. And I think if we help bolster those organizations, that we can really support the well-being of cross sections of our community that really need our support right now. So thank you for listening.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing, Elizabeth. And yeah, that's something we've definitely heard as well from our nonprofit partners and from the community's appreciation of how much those small groups of folks have been able to step up. And I'm a huge data nerd. So I always appreciate when someone says there's data, and along with some of the great stories we were telling. Well, I want to move us on to the next question, but I want to give space for if there's any other reactions to some of the ideas, or if someone wanted to share more about what they put on this whiteboard. All right. I think I will go ahead and move us on to the next question here. Okay. So thinking about what was up on the last whiteboard, the next question is, what would help? So again, we're going to spend the next 5 minutes or so brainstorming what would help with the items that came up on the last board, but also if there's other impacts that you're still seeing of the pandemic, what would help recover? And go. And I just want to make sure it's because you're all writing excellent ideas and thinking, and not that I did something weird with technology. Is everyone able at least to access this whiteboard? And right, I'm seeing Sana give me a nod. Again, if something isn't working, feel free to put your ideas in the chat. Right, I think we'll do another minute or so here. All right, I think we're gonna bring it back. Feel free to keep adding ideas as they come up during this discussion. I wanna make sure we have time to potentially wrap up a little early here. So I love the question or what's coming up about collaboration and data and investment. I did love the question about, or the comment about how helpful it would be to have data and measurements with our vulnerable populations. And this is something Sana has been really diving deep into. So I just want to give her an opportunity to talk about how that's actually a requirement of some of our federal funding.
Yeah, I will share with you that, part of the requirement when we're reporting on how we're investing in these dollars is I can't even talk, sorry, I apologize. The evidence-based interventions, how we're measuring that, and where we're helping in terms of demographics, not just in terms of the U.S. Treasury's talked a lot about the qualified census tracts and where those are in those identified properties and areas, which for us is mostly in the downtown area, North College, in those aspects. But where's that data and where is that comfort level in terms of being able to really utilize that data? The example I give is we were working to really track women and BIPOC owned businesses specifically, and where did they start before the pandemic? What was the opportunities in terms of that overall look? And what we found is we could not be statistically valid unless we added Weld County to the conversation specific in this area. And so that's where we go, where is that comfort level that we're not always going to be statistically valid? And so appreciate the work that Elizabeth and it looks like Sarah Grace has also been definitely looking at, and how we might be able to share that data across, I think is a big piece of that. We've talked a lot about how we share that with the county, and I would mention Poudre School District. We've been working with them in terms of we meet with them monthly, city, county, and Poudre School District, on how might there be crossovers in terms of data and engagement and opportunities, again, to best leverage and help our whole community in terms of recovery as a whole.
Sana, and now I want to open it up for folks to share. I'm really fascinated, especially by the ideas to support BIPOC and our other minority-owned businesses in the community, specifically, how we can elevate them and help highlight the great work that they're doing. And then also the idea of investment as investment in transportation and stuff as well. So opening it up for anyone who'd like to share. And if not, that's okay too. All right, I'm seeing a few more ideas pop up. Give it another minute for everyone to put their last ideas in, and then we'll go ahead and move on to our final question of the evening. As that happens, I'm just moving things around a little bit on our whiteboard so I make sure we can capture all of our ideas. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next board here. All right, our final question, taking that really long view on how we can be resilient and vibrant and build back stronger. What would make Fort Collins stronger? Same as before, I'll let everyone put their ideas up on the board or in the chat. We'll spend the next 5 minutes or so and then one more round of discussion. Right. I really appreciate how thoughtful this group is being and how we're getting paragraphs rather than just words. That's awesome. All right, we'll give it one more minute here just to get a few more ideas up on the board. All right, as always, feel free to keep adding additional ideas as they come to you. I do want to move us on to our discussion here. Loving that we're seeing lots of ideas around equity, prioritizing folks who have been left behind, and acknowledging that folks who are struggling pre-pandemic need support. I know that we have Lindsay X, one of my wonderful colleagues, on the call this evening, and I'm seeing the comment about land acknowledgement and land action for our Native and Indigenous community members. And Lindsay, I'm wondering if you want to give us a little bit of an update on the work that's happening in that space at the city.
You bet, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. Again, Lindsay X, Environmental Services Director. And we've increasingly initiated through our Climate Future and other endeavors at the city have been working with Indigenous community members to really understand their priorities and how we can truly rebuild relationships and begin to get to a place of healing in our community, especially as we think about the historical relationships between government and all of our BIPOC communities, but particularly our Indigenous community members in this space as well. And so in the city manager's recommended budget, there is a budget offer in there. So a funded project that's currently recommended to be funded and up to City Council for $50,000 to develop a land acknowledgement and also to identify through that process of coming together to do this work, what are additional actions that can be taken in this space as well. And so I would just highlight that that's ongoing work, even outside of the recovery. And we also know that our partnerships with our Indigenous communities and all of our BIPOC community members really need to be strengthened through recovery. So that's what I would offer, and happy to share more as well on that if helpful.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lindsay. And I will be sharing as we wrap up this evening other ways to get engaged. And one of them is the budget that Lindsay mentioned. We're going through a budget process right now. So recovery and our budget planning are linked together, and we're sharing data back and forth from that. So that's another great opportunity to plug in as well. But I want to open it up again to the group to share a little bit more about what they put on the board. I'm seeing some great ideas about how we can eliminate redundancy when we're trying to deliver human services, and the K-shaped recovery, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. But who would like to share?
Sarah, maybe I could highlight one more thing, because I'm really hearing feedback from this group around the need for government and the community to follow the leadership of our BIPOC community members. And I would just highlight that we are hearing you, and we are working on that space. And so in this budget offer for land acknowledgement, one of the big pieces of funding is funding our Indigenous community members in that capacity building space to truly lead and for them to take that role. And there's another offer, and Sarah will share more about our budget as well, which I'm glad about, but really talks about the piece around using an equity lens as we think about processes and methodologies. We know that we can lead by example in this space as an organization as well. And so there's another offer in our recommended budget for us to develop consistent practices for applying an equity lens to any city-led project or any effort policy development. So we know that we can do better in this space, and that's just a space of growth and where we're going to work on to fund it. So thanks for letting me share, Sarah.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Any other thoughts or comments before we shift into our wrap up? Oh, Pam, I'm seeing you pop on. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll just add, I love your comments, Lindsay. I'll just add that there have been some great attempts at trying to ameliorate, if you will, or in some way arbiter the governmental and nonprofit and higher education worlds in our community. And there's so much vigilance and a heart in doing that work. But meanwhile, it is a difficult task to somehow have a central organization that can communicate to all agencies a way to address vulnerable populations. Seems that you want to address it at the individual level, but maybe we start with the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods that we know that need our help, the neighborhoods that we know could, if they were stabilized, they would be more productive and be able to thrive in our community. I don't have the answers here because it is an amazing problem, but I love the idea of Fort Collins becoming stronger in this way.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Pam. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing one more time and transition us over to a final slide here. You've seen it before, slightly different. Let me see. Can you guys see it, my PowerPoint screen? All right, I'm seeing a thumbs up from Sana. So again, we've talked a lot this evening about how to engage on this project, and you all get a gold star for coming this evening and being so open with your thoughts. And I do just want to highlight again that our city page where you can go share our additional thoughts and take our survey. Also, please take time to share that with others. If you're interested in having us or come to a community group or talk to your friends or an organization you're involved with, we're happy to do that. We're also happy to provide some resources if you want to host your own conversation like we did this evening, and we can stay out of your way if that's something of interest as well. Lindsay also mentioned budget, and our budget engagement is happening right now. So there's also an Our City page for that, which you can see at the bottom of the slide here. That has additional ways to engage. And then what Travis had shared earlier, all of the different emails that you can reach out to our council members or coming to a council meeting to share your thoughts on the budget. All of that's happening right now. So that's another great way to get involved. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now. And I just want to give Sana and Travis another opportunity to say anything else for wrap up. And you know, they definitely were the ones who are in the hot seat. So I'll give them the opportunity to have the last word of the night.
Well, I don't want to say hot seat, but what I would want to say is thank you. Love the conversation and appreciate. And I think one of the biggest pieces we're learning is to really listen to what our community needs as opposed to try to come in with just solutions. So I appreciate everyone's time in this conversation. You know, I've lived here since the 90s and would not be here without the fact that I love this community. And I think that's being said by everyone here. So I just want to say thank you for your time here today. And I'll hand it over to our fearless leader, Travis.
Thanks, Sana. I have to echo your gratitude. You know, Fort Collins time and time again has shown a very engaged community as measured by election turnouts, participation in events like this one. We're always looking for more of that engagement, but relative to other communities, our community should be pretty darn proud of the way that they engage in local government in an informed and respectful discourse. And that served us well. Fort Collins has elected some really smart leaders over the years also. So thank you for your input tonight. I'll turn it back to Sarah to close us out, and I hope everybody has a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you. Echoing that, and you know, in the spirit of Travis and Sana, we're in the hot seat, but we didn't give them too many questions. I think we'll end the night, but if you have additional questions that you want to ask, I know we have a few extra minutes, so feel free to hang on the call and ask those questions. But otherwise, thank you again for taking time out of your evening. I know that's a big ask, and we just, yeah, so appreciate it, and have a lovely night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.